and welcome back to the Inside of My Head. We've done horrific deeds of the Autobots, so let's take a look across the continuities. At times, the Decepticons have been the good guys. And let's start with the Decepticon Parade. Yeah, that's right, the Decepticons put on a parade and a teen disco once, which undoubtedly made these guys very happy, if only until they realized that it was part of Megatron's evil plan to turn everyone against the Autobots and then fire them into the sun. Bye-bye, Autobots. So made this kid the happiest kid in the world for about a day.
Laser beak want a cracker?
Okay, next one really depends on how you feel about Huffer.
But we're not fighters like they are, Prime.
Known to be whingy and moany and annoying, his very first line in his very first appearance was a whinge about how the Autobots shouldn't waste their time fighting Decepticons. He was whinging about something or other right here, but you know what? You can thank the Decepticons because they bumped him off somewhere off screen during the events of Transformers the movie. Then, after his remains were seen in the giant space mausoleum, the monument to the Autobot dead was promptly flown into a giant red star, almost just to triple make sure that he was never coming back. In Robots in Disguise, 2001 Robots in Disguise, Mega Octane spearheaded a plan to trick the Autobots into thinking that the Commandos and Scourge had switched sides.
Megatron is no longer our master. We'll do whatever we have to do to prove our sincerity, to show you that we've regained our true Autobot identity.
So the Autobots test their commitment to all things good by getting them to do a bunch of annoying menial tasks.
Spread out and clean the forest.
Rebuilding some of the damage they've caused, and policing traffic. There was even one motorist that went through a red light or something, or he was speeding, I can't remember. So they get Rotor to stop him with a bunch of warning shots around his car. And then Scourge comes in. He's like, see this sword? Guess where it's going. You know that this guy is not repeat offending. So the forest got nice and clean, damage was repaired, and this guy learned that he should probably leave the house earlier. Obviously it was all a farce though, and it would have worked as well had Skybite not interfered, prompting Scourge to lose his shit and blow the whole thing.
Enough! This farce is over! Farce?
But you do wonder how it took Optimus this long to figure it out.
Farce? If he means what I think he means.
But he had little white flags. Devastator saved Earth once, yeah, that's true. Normally this guy's daily chores involves stomping Autobot guts out or ripping other combiners in half. There was even this one panel where he was about to crush a family with a newborn baby. Jesus fuck.
Maybe it was an evil baby.
But there was one time, like, remember I mentioned that ep in G1 where the Autobots tried to control him, but Megatron tried to control him even harder, so he went nuts? Well, all that took place during a mission to try and gain control of Earth's geothermal energy. There was this drill trying to burrow to the center of the Earth, plan all went pear-shaped, and then they realized that this is destabilizing the Earth's core. So who do they turn to? My man. So Devastator has to dive down the hole to take out the drill and stop the Earth's core from being, I don't know, pop like a balloon or something? I don't know. Don't know how physics work. But he literally saved the planet there. True story. But let's talk about Starscream. Sneaky, treacherous, rocks a cape like a good un, but also one of the most multi-layered characters in the franchise. There was the time Starscream learned the spirit of Christmas and helped a busload of old people in the Marvel UK comics. Basically, this kid was giving him the whole 9 yards on what Christmas is all about, and when they come across this bus stuck in a snowdrift full of lovely old people, I mean, we think they were lovely. I mean, this guy don't look so lovely. And after Protector-Bot streetwise attacks, Starscream pulls them out of the snow and sends them on their way. He clearly gets a glow happy feeling from saving them, but when this guy goes, see, feels good, doesn't it? He tries to deflect it and tells him, oh no, I'm just happy that I've defeated the Protector-Bot. Yay! But then, right at the end, he turns around and wishes the dude a very Merry Christmas. Heartwarming. I'm really glad they chose Starscream for this one, as he's especially prone to being self-centered quite frequently, putting his own agendas above the Decepticon cause. I mean, of course, he would still peel your skin off if it meant he could wear his crown again. Another major storyline was in Armada, where Starscream was a much more sympathetic character, a guy who just wanted the respect of his peers rather than just to dominate them like the G1 version did. As we saw, he was often mocked by his peers. He was the last to get a minicon, and in one ep they just bail on him, leaving him on this planet expecting him to be killed.
Why have you all abandoned me?
His arrogance does start to grow over the course of the series, but this constant weird power dynamic between Megatron and Starscream, with Starscream constantly being undermined and abused, which Megatron would say is actually galvanizing him and testing his resolve to make him a better warrior, means that you feel for Starscream a lot more than in certain other continuities. And he eventually becomes torn between the Autobots and Decepticons and ultimately killing Megatron becomes his main goal. He shows that he cares about the Minicons, whereas for the most part, they're viewed as tools by most of the Decepticons. He brings the kids back a piece of Mars rock and a souvenir, unlike Optimus in Transformers Prime with that snowball. He gives Optimus the Star Saber to defend himself from Tidal Wave at one point. He hesitates to fire the Hydra Cannon and kill countless Humies, although we don't get to see whether he actually would have pulled the trigger on us or not, as Optimus shows up to save the day. I think he wouldn't have. But the thing that touched me most was this relationship that he had with this girl. I think her name was Alexa, if I remember right. And in a bid to protect her, and by extension everyone else, from the incoming Unicron threat, puts aside his deep hatred of Megatron and tries to get Galvatron to join forces with the Autobots. They don't believe that Unicron exists, or let alone how powerful he is, so he has to give the ultimate example of Unicron's power. So he saves Hotshot from Megatron before challenging Galvatron to one last sword fight to finally settle all the differences they've had over the years. Now this is regarded by many as one of the best scenes in Transformers history. You kinda know that Starscream can't win this, and it culminates with Starscream sacrificing himself to show that Unicron was real and to do the impossible: unite the warring Cybertronians. As he does this, and crumbles away to ash, the rock that he'd given to Alexa mysteriously cracks, and he's seen ejecting, I think it's Swindle, to make sure that he didn't die with him. And then he's blasted to dust. So to recap, loved his Minicons, saved Prime, saved Hotshot, refused to nuke Earth, grew beyond his petty quest for recognition, and managed to put aside his deep hatred for the character who undermined and bullied him for many years, all for the greater good, and in so doing, gained the only one thing he ever wanted.
He was a true soldier, unlike most of you!
Respect. In what I feel is a nod to this storyline, in War for Cybertron Kingdom, he touched the golden disc which gave him a vision about the arrival of Unicron and tried to warn everybody. But nobody listened. But hold on, we are not done with Starscream. Let's talk about how doing the right thing can come back and bite you in the ass. After another failed coup in the All Hail Megatron series, where he persuaded the Constructicons and Insecticons to rise up against Megatron, Starscream was eventually forced to join up with Megatron, who told him that he was persuaded that Starscream would undoubtedly lead the Decepticons one day. Aww. But not today. Alright, I see. This prompted Starscream to get behind his leader and taught him an invaluable lesson: that the leadership of the Decepticons isn't just something that you slither into, it has to be earned, or taken if you want to frame it in Decepticon terms. Then, after Megatron sustains horrific injuries at the hands of Spike, who shoots him in the face, allowing Optimus to batter him with his own fusion cannon, it's Starscream who stops Optimus from finishing the job. Optimus even says to Starscream, "The crown is yours if you want it, all you have to do is walk away," but Starscream refuses and takes Megatron to be rebuilt. So that's pretty noble, right? Well, it kinda went off the rails from there, and you know how they say that a dream come true isn't always a blessing? Well, he takes leadership of the Decepticons with the symbolic matrix of leadership, but they quickly begin running out of energon, and so begins the infighting and even cannibalizing each other. Here he has the chance to mind control his troops and bring them into line that way, but he refuses, stating that he wants them to follow his lead willingly and out of respect. But then, Megatron wakes up in an upgraded new body, sees how run down his elite fighting force, like the army that he spent thousands of years building, has become, and begins a complete mental breakdown of Starscream, tormenting and torturing him mentally and physically to the point where he begged for death not once, but twice, pushing him beyond despair. The really fucked up thing here was that seeing his dream shattered already broke Starscream. He was already at rock bottom right here, but Megatron wants him shattered into pieces. It's pretty dark, this one. He started out the same shitbag that he always is, learned his lesson, did the right thing, and then this storyline absolutely destroyed him for it. So Starscream, on the surface a self-centered egomaniac, but you don't have to look far beneath the surface to find a few good deeds, even if they don't always work out in his favor. We gotta mention Buzzsaw. Now it's easy to dismiss this dude as a recolored Laserbeak, but in IDW's continuity, he saved a herd of elephants from poachers, giving them exactly what they deserve and a most painful death. Now he does this to honor his friend Soundwave, who used to love elephants. Elephants being his favorite Earth creatures, apparently. And we'll come back to Soundwave in a couple of minutes. One example of a guy who's got some good karma coming to him is Thundercracker. Thundercracker was always a reluctant Decepticon, pressured into joining the Decepticons by his best budsy Skywarp, drafted into Starscream's gang, the Seekers, and even had his body remodeled to resemble Starscream's body, which at first he thought an honor, until it turned out to be a ploy to confuse taxpayers that Starscream had screwed over. Yes, Starscream was basically a corrupt politician in this one. Anyway, back to Thundercracker, he hesitated when it came to needless wanton violence. For example, when Bludgeon wanted to strap Orion Pax to a rocket and blast it at the nearest Autobot camp, Thundercracker objected to the amount of neutrals that it would kill. Later, Megatron ordered a huge hunt for parts of Titans, and Thundercracker downplayed the fact that he might have found a piece of Metroplex on this planetoid here, but unfortunately couldn't dissuade Bludgeon from investigating, nor could he persuade him from attacking the residents. But Thundercracker did try to warn them, hoping to scare them away with his sonic booms. But it didn't really work, and many were killed. He then lied again, telling Bludgeon that them coming to this planet must have been an Autobot lure, so Bludgeon got pissed off and kicked him out of the outfit. Then, after Megatron ordered a nuclear bomb dropped on New York, I think it was, he finally came clean with his opinion that a fair fight was one thing, but a slaughter was another. And he flew up, he caught the bomb, took it into space, where it detonated a safe distance away from any population. He tried to explain his logic to his best buddy Skywarp, but Skywarp, incensed by the betrayal, just shot him in the face and blew his brains out, but he was fine. After that, he found himself a nice cozy abandoned building and hooked himself up some cable TV and sat there for a year and a half, no less. What a potato! Have you ever actually met anyone who says potato? And watching all this TV gave him this sort of admiration for humankind. Like somehow watching 1,000 episodes of Prison Break taught him that we are really adaptable as a species, whereas they, beings who can literally transform, are kind of steadfast in their ways. Over the years, this love of TV developed into a desire to become a screenwriter, and he even wrote his own sitcom featuring a plucky young heroine and her boyfriend, Dave Boyfriend or whatever, like his surname was literally Boyfriend. Hi, my name's Chris, husband and father. Hi, I'm Jason, gets rowdy in strip clubs. Just call me Crocodile Clamps, don't ask why. Then he wrote A Christmas Story featuring himself in the lead role as a detective investigating the murder of his best friend Marissa Fairborn, with his prime suspect being Santa Claus, who he has a fist fight with. But in a shock horror plot twist, turns out it was Megatron who framed Santa though, and once Thundercracker defeats him, he teams up with Santa to deliver everyone's presents. It's brilliant writing. You know what, as bad a writer as this guy was meant to be, he probably should have tried his hand at writing some episodes of Star Trek, because I bet it was better than this shit. Anyway, back to Thundercracker, he even got his own dog called Buster, who he loved to bits. And I shit you not, he even provided iPads and web access to poor people. Also pushed Sunstreaker out of the line of fire when Galvatron shot at him with his fusion cannon. It cost Thundercracker his arm, and he didn't even really like Sunstreaker that much. In the comic title Thundercracker and Buster Save the World, well, you know, the title kind of explains itself really, but he helps people evacuate a burning building right here, and then he helped fight off a bunch of Seeker clones and Dire Wraiths, and he even killed their leader by impaling on the Phallus of Freedom right here. I'll talk more about the Dire Wraiths in my most powerful beings and Transformers that aren't Autobots or Decepticons. Make sure you subscribe for that. Also kicked off the Cybertronian movie industry in the comic Starscream the Movie, where Starscream hired him to write a biopic about him, and he even was nominated for an award for Best Original Screenplay. And in the middle of all this movie shit, he had to reunite with Skywarp and Starscream to help fight Unicron, but who cares about that, right? The most important thing is, did he win the award? Well, you never actually find out. It ends at that moment.
And the Oscar goes to...
And then it just ends. I would love to see the presenter go, and the award goes to Steven Spielberg. And Thundercracker just vaporized the presenter with his fusion cannon and like chop everybody's heads off with his laser eyes. Just grab Harry Styles, throw him down and stomp, stomp, stomp. So Thundercracker grew a love for the human race, did a variety of humanitarian deeds, prevented a city from getting nuked, saved the Earth from alien invasion, became an award-winning writer, or nominated at least, and is Dog Person. What a life this guy had! Some would say a lot of this stuff isn't really relevant because he renounced being a Decepticon, I think around the nuclear bomb incident. But I would say that A, he never became an Autobot either, he was neutral, and B, that's being really harsh on someone who had a more eventful life than Forrest Gump. Another one who's seen the light side in a big way is Soundwave. And before we get carried away, let's not forget that this guy is no saint. Considered by many as the right hand of Megatron, he took part in many a dirty deed, including this attack where many squishy humies were horribly slaughtered, and apparently it was him that stomped on this news presenter live on air. But he did try to stop his fellow Decepticons unleashing the devastating destructive force that is Thunderwing. Check out my most powerful Decepticons vid if you want to know more about him, before Iguanas blasted him with a beam that locked him in his alt mode for 23 years. And that might not be that long a time to them, considering that they live for millennia, but imagine being stuck in an odd position for any length of time. He also grieved for Frenzy, again showing the bond between these guys. And of course, his loyalty to Megatron is without question. In Cyberverse, Tarn uses the Cortex helm to control an army of super soldiers to finish off what Megatron never could and kill Optimus and the Autobots. But eventually Soundwave, with the help of Laserbeak, manages to get the Cortex helm off of Tarn's head and puts it on just long enough to reprogram the other super soldiers and give them free will, before Tarn gets the upper hand and manages to get the helm back, heavily damaging Shockwave in the process. But Shockwave summons the last of his energy to blast out a huge sonic blast that destroys not only Tarn, but himself in the process, leaving only a large crater in the ground where they once stood. And if you thought that sacrifice was noble, if you thought that was a beautiful moment, well, let's talk about IDW's incarnation of Soundwave. He was at first considered a freak because of his hearing abilities, which were so strong he could even hear other bots' thoughts. But in the cataclysmic final battle against Unicron, remember the one where Optimus dived into the black hole? Soundwave was instrumental in Unicron's defeat, with him having his telepathic ability amped up by Jetfire to such a level that he could breach the boundary between life and death, and drew on the power of all those who died in the conflict to pass on to Optimus so he could use it against Unicron's creator. All this power was so great though that Soundwave's body slowly disintegrated as he uttered his final words, Operation Absolution. Meaning that this is him attempting to make up for all the bad things he's done. I thought this was an epic moment. I think this might be my favorite ending of anything Transformers, in any continuity, apart maybe from Transformers the movie, with the voice of Prime. That was epic too.
Arise, Rodimus Prime. Optimus.
Which brings me on to Ravage. Ravage to me is another great example of the loyalty that the Decepticons have shown to each other over the years. Loyalty to the point that Ravage stood by Megatron even when Megatron stepped down as Decepticon leader to become an Autobot pacifist, when many others didn't. I mean, he still had moments of frustration with Megatron, like when Megatron refused to fight Tarn. Ravage shouted that he was ashamed of Megatron. In the ensuing battle, Tarn, knowing that Ravage and Megatron were close, focused on getting hold of Ravage, and well, see for yourself. Heartbreaking. What this did do though was fire up Megatron enough to get his ass in gear and cut his way through Tarn's men and take on both Tarn and Overlord. So Megatron says one last goodbye to his old friend at the statue, with Ravage next being seen in that panel depicting the afterspark and the sparks of all those fallen, where he welcomed his other great friend Soundwave as he crossed into the land of the dead. So Ravage makes the list not so much because of his deeds, but just because of the exemplary loyalty that he shows. Couple of notable mentions go to the Decepticons. Again, we're trying to destroy Earth. Yeah, I know, just hear me out. So if, as in the last night, the Earth formed around the body of an inert Unicron, maybe destroying Earth was for the best, like in the grand scheme of things. I'm just saying. I am just saying. Ideally, you would move the human race off of it first, but you can also see how the Decepticons might consider us just collateral damage. I never actually really liked those continuities that put Unicron inside Earth. It made me feel like, well, should we actually be protecting this rock at all?
Your resurrection will only result in the destruction of a species which evolved from the seeds of your very greatness.
Fuck them.
Another notable mention goes to Skywarp, who got pissed off that he wasn't getting the repairs he needed from Galvatron, so he did what would have ordinarily been unthinkable to him and joined G.I. Joe. And had lots of adventures.
Blah blah.
I feel like I should talk about Dinobot.
I've studied the legends of the Primes. They were warrior heroes with pure sparks.
But most of his good deeds happened after turning to the Autobot side, although he did prevent Nyx from getting executed in the Beast Wars comic. He also tried to stop Beast Wars Megatron's plan in War for Cybertron Kingdom.
Just hand it back.
And last notable mention goes to all the Decepticons in the Shattered Glass continuity, because as you know, that's a mirror universe. Good equals bad, bad equals good. It's just not one that I'm particularly familiar with, so can't talk about it much here. Okay, so I've kept the top spot for Megatron. It's said that this guy has killed more people than have ever lived. And just to give you a little insight into his psyche, let me read this quote that I found on the wiki page. "So long as anyone stands in my way, I will respond by killing. murder on an industrial scale. Because in the final analysis, I would happily wade across a river of corpses, chest deep in rust and grease and engine oil, just to crush the spark of the last Autobot standing. And I would not simply do it as a means to an end. No, I'd do it, Prime, because it would give me pleasure. For what? Yes, those are the words of Megatron, and it's time to talk about the head honcho, old Buckethead himself. Now, hearing those words, I mean, those are the words of a monster, right? And he probably is a monster, but he has teamed up with the Autobots more than a few times, especially when it comes to fighting a greater threat like Unicron.
Join me in defeating our shared enemy.
He briefly joined forces with the Autobots to stop Starscream and Bruticus from pushing the Earth into the sun using a reconfigured space bridge.
If it weren't for his help, we wouldn't have any friends to return to.
He helped the Autobots to take down a rampaging Scorponok in Earthrise, and as I talked about in my last vid, he also single-handedly defeated the Devoid's avatar Decepticon, which saved Cybertron and possibly the universe, as no doubt the Devoid would have gone on to take over everything, probably. But right here, we need to talk about how, in a few continuities, the whole of the Decepticon uprising is actually a noble movement, or at least it was to begin with. In the aligned continuity, it's explained how Megatron started the Decepticon movement in response to the Cybertronian High Council imposing a highly unfair and unequal order upon the populace. It was a strict caste system where basically as a Cybertronian your function in life was designated at birth. It was discriminatory and what we would call racist. Megatron, or D16 as he was known back then, was first designated as a minor, with his name, D16, in fact being taken from the grid designation of the area he worked in, like they weren't even really allowed proper names. Anyway, D16 became fascinated by the illegal gladiator fights that the miners would organize to entertain themselves, and once he got involved, realized that he was pretty good at it. And this is because he had one of those like green sparks, which meant he was like a 0.1%er and immensely powerful. He would have philosophical debates about the purpose of life and society, and eventually rose to become Megatronus, and in turn Megatron. At this point, at least, his mantra was that the freedom of self-determination was the right of all sentient beings. I mean, that's as noble as it gets, right? But his impatience and uncompromising attitude would often lead to violence, and recognizing that Megatron was a tyrant in the making, the Matrix of Leadership and title of Prime was bestowed upon Orion Pax, even though he didn't really want it, something that sent Megatron even more mad and plunged the Empire into civil war. But IDW showed that that noble side of his personality was never fully gone when it resurfaced, when, in short, Bumblebee managed to get through to Megatron's good side before being killed by Shockwave. And I'll go into this in more detail in my next vid, which is about Shockwave's plan to collapse all of reality, excluding Cybertron, into a black hole. But for the purposes of what we're talking about here, Bumblebee's death prompted Megatron to take Bumblebee's insignia, put it on his own chest, and declare himself an Autobot. This broke Shockwave's mind and enabled Megatron and Prime to get the better of him. After this point, we saw a more repentant Megatron who willingly stood trial publicly. He refused to escape when Hunger and Snaptrap tried to break him out, and even tried to change the legacy that he left behind him by suggesting that he search out the Knights of Cybertron and be judged by them. Basically, he thought that by doing this, he'd be remembered for doing something positive rather than just sowing blood and death and carnage. So he denounced the Decepticon cause and told the remaining Decepticons to stand down and set off with the Lost Light crew to find the Knights of Cybertron. But I can't help but think back to D16, whose future consisted of an eternity of breaking rocks and drilling holes, and simply refused to accept the shitty hand that he'd been dealt. A guy who turned an entire civilization upon its head. A guy who put his life on the line to try and change things for the better. So in conclusion, when you look at it from a certain angle, could it be that Megatron is actually the hero of the Transformers story? But let me know what you guys think. Do you think that if he hadn't become a tyrant, if absolute power hadn't corrupted him absolutely, he would have been the greatest Cybertronian leader of all time, wouldn't he? Anyway guys, I got to leave it there. I'm sure there are loads of examples that I've missed, so please feel free to pop them in the comments below. I have got to say a huge thank you for 20k subscribers, and I have not forgotten the giveaways, trust me. It's just that I'm kind of broke as fuck at the moment, and yeah, no biggie, but just bear with me. Next up is my long-promised video about Shockwave, as well as craziest Transformers designs. So until then, thank you very much for watching, thank you very much for everything. And I will see you very soon for the next one. Cheerio, bye!